On today's episode of the Virginia Investor Podcast, we have Mike Hogan, the founder and owner of the Hogan Group, a real estate brokerage that has grown to approximately 80 agents across Virginia. He's a real estate investor, broker, and entrepreneur. Mike, I have heard a ton of good things about you. I am excited to get to know you in this podcast and learn more about your story and how you've seen some of the success that you've seen, not only just from like growing a business, which is terribly difficult, but also investing, also going through the global financial crisis and all the things you've been through that's gotten you here to see some of the success that you've seen today, the wins and losses and things like that. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm actually super excited to be here. First off, I've wanted to meet you. I mean, you've grown a heck of a business yourself in a pretty short period of time. So I've been wanting to talk to you for a while.
Awesome.
And quite honestly, I just love doing this stuff. This is fun stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. Like, obviously growing a business, I think what I used to do was meet with people like you, like as much as possible to learn and to build the network and things like that. Then you grow a business and you kind of like, at least for me, I lost sight of some of that because then I had a team to take care of and everything.
Yep.
And so this podcast is a good way to sit down in front of you and get to know you.
That is super smart. I mean, it's easy to learn the lessons along the way and then forget them because you're so busy in the grind.
Right.
I mean, you get to doing things and you forget to stop and think about the things that you should be doing.
Right.
It's easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started with your childhood. Like, where were you born? How was growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, a couple hours southwest of here. You know, typical middle class upbringing, nothing too crazy. I didn't, there's not a lot in my childhood that, I can talk about that says, holy crap, he had such a rough childhood. I mean, I had a great upbringing.
Yeah.
Lived in, in a small rural suburb outside of Lynchburg. Typical, both parents worked. I was a latchkey kid from probably the time I was 5. Probably has a lot to say about my independence today. But, I had great parents. They were very loving. And, it's interesting because growing up, I watched them. My mom worked in a factory. My dad was an engineer. And, back then you worked for the same company for 30 years, 40 years and retired and you had a pension. And, that's all I knew at the time.
Right.
And it wasn't really until I got older that I really fell in love with the idea of entrepreneurism.
Right.
But back then, that's what I thought you did. You graduate high school, you go to college, you have 2.3 kids, you climb the corporate ladder, and that's your life. And in 30 years, you retire. Obviously, I've taken a little bit different path since then. Right. But that was kind of the way I thought about it.
That's all people teach you. I mean, that was like the life that you live, and people are more than happy with that life until you realize there's more to it.
Until you realize there's something else out there. Yeah.
What did you play sports growing up? Were you really focused on grades or both or what?
I would love to tell you that I was focused on grades, but I was focused on girls and drinking. That was my that was my sport. No, I joke about that. I did all the things. I did the Little League football, baseball, basketball. Did track through high school, track cross country. I was a runner, and did that. Graduated, went to Longwood, and there I majored in partying for a couple of years.
Yeah, nice.
No, it was fun. I had a good time, but grades were important to me once I got to college. I didn't focus so much on it in high school, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
But once I got into school, I buckled down a little bit more. I had a good time, but I mean, I learned a lot, and school was really important to me. I always knew from a fairly early age I was going to go to college and I was going to graduate with a great job and do all the things. So it wasn't a surprise that where I went, I studied business, and I was super excited about what I was learning about. So it was easy to focus.
Did you have know what you wanted to do? Like when you went to college, you're like, this is what I want to do in my profession, in my career? Or were you like, let's just study and let's see what happens after college?
Yeah, this was, you got to remember, I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s. So, for me, it was all about finance and sales. And I wanted to be a stockbroker. That was my thing. I wanted to be on Wall Street. And it didn't happen. And looking back, I'm really glad it didn't because stockbrokers aren't exactly a thing anymore. Everything went electronic, obviously. So that was what I wanted to do. But as I got into it, I quickly learned, where my strengths were. My strengths were in marketing and sales. So I majored in marketing and came out of that, went directly into sales. I've been in sales roles for a while. Mm-hmm. Took some operations roles, which I was good at because I was good with numbers. So statistics was a thing for me. And I felt really solid with like process management and process development and things like that from the operational side. So I did that for a little while, but I got bored real fast.
Interesting.
And the idea, I mean, I have ADD off the charts. So the idea of sitting behind a desk all day long, crunching numbers, it was such a bad idea from the very beginning. So that was that.
So did you know like your strength was sales and marketing and not like you were good at operations, but you didn't want to do it?
Operations kind of just happened.
Right.
Getting out of college, I just wanted to get a job.
Right.
It was back then. It was I needed to make money, and I needed to figure out a way to do that. I had what I wanted to do, and I knew that my long-term career would probably take me somewhere into sales and marketing. But back then, graduating in the late '80s, early '90s, it was just found a job that was paying, and I went to work at that point for Capital One. I was working in their customer service center. It was Signet Bank when I started. Then we got spun off into Capital One. So I was there at the startup of Capital One, and that's where the operations role kind of took off because again, I'm thinking climb the corporate ladder.
Of course.
So for me, it was what can I do to go to the next level? What do I need to be doing? And from there, I took a night shift job with Capital One in operations so that I could get into a management role, and did that for a couple of years. Then got pulled away, got recruited by Wachovia Bank down in North Carolina. They were looking for somebody to run an operations department for them. So I left Capital One, went to Wachovia, worked for them for a little while. And that was interesting because they wanted young blood in, but this was a company that was managed by people who managed like it was in the 70s. And while they wanted young blood in, they didn't want to listen to young blood.
Interesting.
And so that didn't last for very long. I ended up leaving there, going to GE, was with GE Financial back in Richmond. Worked as a Six Sigma analyst there, worked on process management, process development, stuff like that. That was fun. I enjoyed that. But I was finishing up grad school at the time. I'd started going to grad school.
Interesting.
And was working on my MBA. In grad school, one of my last classes I took was an entrepreneurship class. And so a buddy of mine and I had to come up with a business together that we would start if we weren't doing what we were doing. And we came up with this idea of a marketing company that bought Remnet ad space and sold continuity products and so forth. And we were like, this is freaking awesome. So when it was time for me to graduate, I turned in my last tuition reimbursement and my resignation to GE on the same day and left that world and went and started a marketing company. And that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey, to be perfectly honest. Did that for a little while. It was fun. We had a good time with it. Burned through a lot of money, learned a lot of lessons about how to actually run a company and how important cash is.
Who were your clients? Like what sort of?
So primarily banks. We worked a lot with banks, telecommunications companies, anybody who had a call center. Because if you think about it, when you call into a call center, at the end of the call, they're like, would you like to wait 5 minutes and take a survey? It's only going to take 30 seconds for the survey. That was us. We were the ones that would do that survey, and then we would pitch them a product, typically like a health product or an insurance product or something like that. Pretty soon we moved into, we were marketing a calling card. This was back really before long distance on cell phones was a thing.
Right.
And so we were marketing calling cards to lower income people who needed to call home, typically in another country. So we started marketing those types of products to them. And that worked really well. We were doing well. Again, we burned through a lot of cash, learned a lot of lessons. We ended up selling the company to our largest client and went to work for them for about 6 months. Did that for a little while. That was, again, it was kind of it was an in-between stage. They just wanted our brain for a little while to make sure that they knew how to do everything. And then after that, I was free. And I was like, Jesus, man, what do I do now?
Were you in a stage of like financial freedom from the exit of the company? Or like, did you get enough capital to consider like, okay, you got options, you got time, and now you can figure out how to be more free with what you do next?
It was enough that I was able to step back and figure out what I really wanted. I was also very fortunate. My wife had a great job at the time. She was making 6 figures. And, when I was done with that, I was like, what do I want to do here? Going back to work in corporate America was the last thing in the world I wanted to
After
do. After
entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, like I would have been the worst employee in the world.
Is it the freedom that you felt and the ability to make quick decisions and make things happen? Is that what attracted you to it?
Yeah, I think that was probably the big part of it, the freedom and just the fact of knowing that I'm betting on myself. Like that's what I hated about corporate America. I'm still friends with some of the people that I worked with back then, and I honestly felt like I was smarter than the people that I was working for, and that bothered me because I was doing things, making them look good. And, I was still making the same amount of money. Didn't matter what I did. Right. And that's what I loved about going the entrepreneurial way is if I put more effort into it, if I made good decisions, if I did things that I needed to do, I made more money. And it was all based on me. It wasn't based on somebody else.
Right. And conversely, if you make bad decisions, you make less money.
Absolutely.
So there's risk, but you're betting on yourself.
And I've done that. So I've had, an equal amount of good and bad. So, I for sure.
But to that point, you said I'm betting on myself, and that's what you enjoy, right? And that's what I think more of us should do. We should find the confidence to bet on ourselves because, it's hard work and it can be brutal. And there's some losses along the way, but it's worth it. Yeah.
Like even when you make the bad decisions, there's nights when you don't sleep. There's nights when I'm like freaking, not now so much, but especially in the beginning when I was thinking about, am I going to make payroll? Yeah. How am I going to make payroll? There was times when I made sure everybody else got paid, but I didn't get to eat. And, I had 2 young kids at the time, so I was also thinking about making sure that they were able to go to college and making sure that they didn't feel when I was stressed and so forth. So there was that pull from that side of it of making sure that, hey, I'm still being a good dad. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. But on the other side, man, it got hard there sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, especially with young kids.
Especially with young kids.
Yeah, I kind of joke, but it's okay if you have to live in a van. But you're a kid.
But my kids, exactly. So, I'll never let them know that I'm living in a van, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So fortunately, you've developed this marketing company to where you could exit and at least get some capital out of it to where you're comfortable for a bit. Wife has a well-paying job.
Yep.
Now you have a decision to make of what do you do next?
Yeah.
Is that where real estate enters the picture?
That's where real estate entered the picture. So real estate actually entered the picture a little bit before that. So I had started buying some rental properties. I was always big into investing. Stock market was my thing. And so I did well during the early 2000s with the internet run up and things like that. I also lost some money when everything went bust, but I learned a lot of lessons from it. But I started getting interested in real estate. I started buying rentals, and I had a buddy of mine that introduced me to real estate at the time. And I think the thing that intrigued me is I always made the argument, real estate, why would I ever invest in real estate? It goes up 3% a year, and I can put my money into an S&P fund and make 9% a year. Why would I ever invest in real estate? But I wasn't thinking about all the advantages of real estate. I wasn't thinking about that 3% a year is only based on, however much cash I actually have into it. It's not the entire amount. If I put $10,000 down on a $100,000 property and it goes up 3%, that's a 30% increase for me on a cash return. So I wasn't thinking about it that way. And when I started thinking about that, I was like, that's kind of interesting. And then when you throw on top of that the idea that you can depreciate an appreciating asset, that just blew my mind that was even a thing.
Right.
So I think that was the genesis for me when I had this conversation with my buddy and he explained to me why I should be in real estate. And I started thinking about this makes sense. So at that point I started buying real estate. That was really the late 90s to around 2000.
I assume your buddy was doing it.
He was.
Right? Yeah. And so where were you getting, outside of your buddy, where were you getting any other information on this?
Once I heard about it, I started reading everything I could possibly read. I was all over the internet doing everything I could find on the internet, which back then was pretty sparse.
Right.
Lots and lots of books. Rich Dad Poor Dad was a thing even back then. So, I read that front cover to back cover. I read so many books just trying to get the mindset right more than anything else. But really, real estate investing, you can learn as much as you can from books and podcasts and everything else. But until you do a deal, that's the true learning.
Yeah.
It's the books and everything else to me is about the mindset.
Right.
It's just making sure that, okay, I'm not a complete idiot going into this. I know what I'm looking for. But honestly, you don't know what it's like until you actually buy that deal and you start working it.
And that's a great point because so many people wait to read all the books before they take action. I need to read this other book and read this. There are people you can put on your team to help you work through the process. 100%. You just have to take that action.
Yeah, you got to take the action. At the end of the day, I'll be honest, it's hard to lose money in real estate. It really is. Don't get me wrong, it can be done. Mm-hmm. And I've lost money in real estate, but it's hard to do it. If you have the right people in your corner that are helping you and looking out for you, just, go buy the deal. You're probably not going to lose money. Maybe you won't make as much as you would love to make.
Break even and learn.
But just break even if nothing else, just to get into it and I can tell you, once you do the first deal, the next 5 are easy.
Yep.
And once you do the first 5, the next 40 are even easier.
Right.
And it becomes an addiction. Like it's, you buy one house, and next thing you know, you have 75. I mean, it's just like, that's just the way it feels like. Obviously that's over time, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah. And then to me, it was a race to 5 initially, because then the 5 started paying for anything that happened on those 5.
Yeah.
And then the cash flow started increasing, which would then pay for that. And then you saw the tax advantages at the end of the year. And then you saw, and it all started, your net worth is climbing. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is why
it
it's
becomes so much
Right.
easier to buy. That's why, like, even today, and I know I'm jumping ahead right now, but even today, I mean, prices are up, interest rates are up. I have a lot of people saying, are you still buying houses? And I'm like, yeah, I'm still buying houses because I can see the numbers work, and I see how the numbers work, and I know how it compounds over time.
You also have a long-term view of things. Like you have the experience to where you're not buying these houses and you're getting rich tomorrow.
No,
like,
I'm looking at this for 30. This is a legacy buy for me at this point.
There you go.
Don't get me wrong. I've got enough money to live comfortably. I don't really need it. For me, it's all about legacy at this point. I'm building something that my kids' will be able to benefit from. And so that's really the way I look at it at this point.
How are you finding these initial deals? I know it's way different now, but how are you finding these deals back in the late 90s?
Most of it was on the MLS.
On the market.
The MLS book. Yeah. It was stuff that was on the market. Primarily, we were doing some basic marketing back then. Lots of stuff on the foreclosure, like going to the foreclosure auctions on the county steps. Did a lot of that. Got a lot of stuff that were on the market at that time. It was, I will say, back then, it was easier to get stuff on the market. And the foreclosure auctions, back then, there might be 6 or 8 people that showed up for an auction.
Right.
And if you just waited for one that was on a rainy day, you'd be the only one in a lot of cases. That's not the case anymore now. I mean, you go to these foreclosure auctions today, and there's 100 people at a lot of them. It's just that part of the business has definitely changed.
Did you know anything about creative financing or private lending or anything back then?
Not so much. Back then, banks would actually lend on properties, so it was pretty easy to just go to the bank and say, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for money for a flip, or I'm looking for one to renovate. And this is pre-financial crisis, so I could walk into a bank, they would lend on the ARV of the property, and I could walk out of a closing and have money in my pocket.
Yeah, it's insane.
Like it was insane. That was probably the reason we ended up in the financial crisis, to be perfectly honest. But money was so much easier then. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's easy now if you've got the experience, but it was then you can literally walk into a small bank and just say, here's what I'm looking for, and if you were trustworthy, they'd give you the money.
Yeah, I feel like now money is easy through relationships.
Correct.
Back then, I was not in the game, but back then I would assume money is just easy through banks and anywhere they wanted.
Money was free flowing. Right. I mean, they were just looking for places to put money. Banks were looking for people to lend money to, as opposed to the other way around.
Right. Leading up to the financial crisis, you were flipping homes, right? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, because obviously I was not in the game during that point. But what did that feel like? What did it look like as you were like getting into that and kind of seeing some things are starting to change? Yeah. And then how did you adapt as a business owner?
Yeah. So let's go back to when we sold the company, and I was at that point trying to figure out what I was going to do next, because what I decided to do was flip houses for a living. And that worked well. We're talking, this was 2003, 2004. And let's be real, flipping houses from 2003 to about 2008 worked awesome. Made great money doing it. It was fun. I had all the freedom in the world, and was still keeping a couple rentals here and there and that kind of thing. So the run up to it felt super easy. Like it felt like you could do no wrong. Like I felt like I couldn't possibly lose money on a house. And it's funny. It's kind of like, I go back and equate it to the stock market. When stock market's rising, everybody looks like a genius, right? Because you don't lose money when the stock market's rising. But when the stock market starts going down, it's the smart people that figure it out. And it's the same thing in real estate. So it was, felt great until it didn't. Yeah. And the thing is, it was wild. I mean, you would think that people saw this coming for a while and that you would feel it, but you never really did. Like things just kept going. Money was plentiful. Things were still happening. And then all of a sudden, one day, you found out that your credit line's cut off. Nobody's lending money. I mean, it was insane. And it was kind of like a shock. Like, holy crap. Like what happened?
In hindsight, now you didn't see it at the time from what it sounds like, but in hindsight, did you or other investors just have blinders on and sort of were ignoring signs, or was it just completely you shouldn't have known, wouldn't have known, and then one day it was cut?
Yeah, looking back, I should have known.
What signs?
There were plenty of signs. I mean, there was, housing had started slowing down. 2000, I'd say late 2006 into 2007, there was plenty of information out there that told us that housing was slowing. Builders were overbuilding. Supply was getting way out of hand. When I say way out of hand, and we talk about today, we hear, there's 2 or 3 months of supply. It was 9 months of supply. And when you start hearing that, we should have known at that point that, hey, something's seriously wrong. Something's broken here. But houses were still selling.
Right.
I mean, especially, we were focusing on 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, $200,000 ARV houses, and those were still selling. Like, people were still getting money on those straight up until really late 2007, early 2008. And when everything happened on Wall Street, you see Lehman Brothers fall, and you see these things happen, and you see it, and you're like, you don't really understand how that's going to affect Main Street America until the day when the bank calls and says, hey, your credit line, we're calling that. And that's when you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, that's my lifeline. Like,
Right.
if you cut my credit line off, how do I make money?
Right.
And at that point, that's what we were doing. Everything was based on credit. We would, I had rental properties. I borrowed money on the rental properties, had credit lines against the rental properties because you could. And then all of a sudden it was just, hey, yeah, this is no longer a thing. And it went from money being super plentiful and easy to, holy shit, man, I don't, how am I going to do this now?
Right.
And that's what happened. That's what it felt like. And it was abrupt. Like, it hit, and it was like all at one time. Like, everybody was calling their loans. Everybody wanted their credit lines taken care of. And I'll tell you that I get the question a lot of times, Mike, what's the biggest mistake you made? Like, what's one where you lost money on? And it was one that I bought in 2007. And it was in Churchill, South of Broad, big, beautiful brick house. And I had been doing all these little 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 3-bath, 2-bath houses. And it had that niche going and was doing really well. And then I saw this big, beautiful brick house with big numbers. And I'm like, man, I can make on that in,
3 flips.
and what I would make on 3 or 4 flips. Right. And so I got super excited about it, and I got into it, and the job was much bigger than I expected it to be. We ended up gutting the entire interior. I mean, everything had to be replaced. We basically ended up with a shell, and I ended up putting about double the amount that I had budgeted into it. And not only did I put too much into it, I got to the point where it was time to sell it, and I couldn't sell it. We're in 2008, and nobody's buying houses. There's no mortgages. Nobody can get a mortgage on a house like that. And so here I am stuck with this house that I owe way more on it than it's even worth. And even if I could sell it, like, I would have to take such a discount on it. Right. And that was painful. Yeah. That was probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned in real estate right there.
So the banks are calling your loans and you can't sell out of it. Because like right now, you just say like, well, I'll just sell my house if something goes wrong. Or sell like some houses out of my portfolio. You have equity. But you're stuck. Yeah. So like, what do you do? How did you navigate?
That's when I really kind of pivoted my business. So at that time, I had become a realtor in 2005, primarily because I hated working with real estate agents. It sounds funny to say today, but I really did. I mean, I got to
Why? What was that?
I was that guy, I call a real estate agent because I see a sign in the yard and I'm like, hey, let me call the guy on the sign and, find out if I can go in and see the house or whatever, and never get a call back, all the normal stuff that you hear about bad realtors, right? So that's when I said, I'm just going to get my license so I have access to the MLS and I can get into the houses myself and do all the things.
It's hilarious that you're like, because you hated dealing with real estate agents.
That's true.
But yeah, so they weren't responsive enough.
So yeah, so that was around 2005 when I actually got my license. Yeah. But when the bottom kind of fell out of everything, at first it's trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Because I'd been making my money from flipping houses. That was obviously no longer going to be available to me. What do I do now? And so I leaned into the real estate world because before I wasn't really worried about selling that much. I had a few investors that I worked with, friends and that kind of thing, but I didn't focus on selling. So it was probably 2008 that I woke up and was like, okay, I've got to make money another way. And I had rental properties, but that's another story I'll get to in a minute on rental properties and why the rental properties weren't funding what I needed them to fund.
You shifted, so you adapted, you got your license, and then you were thinking, like, my question already is like, all of this is happening in the great financial crisis. You're running into all these issues with real estate, but now you're like, let's adapt.
Let's adapt and lean into real estate.
Right. Yeah. So what was the thought pattern behind
So I didn't want to get out of real estate. Like back to the same thing I felt in, the early 2000s. I mean, sure, I could go and get a job somewhere. And the thought went through my head. I'm not going to lie. There was a couple times when the thought went through my head, should I just go and get a job? Because remember, kids at this point. I've got a daughter who would be graduating in 2015. So, college is something that's coming up pretty fast and so forth. But no, I leaned into sales a little bit more and leaned into the investment world. And for me, I would wake up every morning and saying, okay, how many $50,000 houses can I sell today, or do I need to sell today in order to make sure that my car payments are paid, my kids are fed, my mortgage is paid, and all of that stuff. And that was my personal side of the my balance sheet. The business side of my balance sheet was my rental properties, and that was another disaster at that time. And it was a disaster because one of my other lessons that I've learned in real estate is when I started buying rentals, I was worried about cash flow on paper, right? And you can back then you could buy $30,000 houses in South Side of Richmond and have a $200 a month mortgage payment and rent them out for $600 or $700 a month. Right. And the cash flow was amazing, right? And so I looked at that and said, okay, that's going to be my path to wealth, is I'm going to buy all these little shitbox houses and make a ton of cash flow on them. Right. Well, cash flow on paper and cash flow in reality are two very, very different things. And what I found was those properties are also ones that I had the most problems with vacancies on. Yep. When people left, they didn't do nice things to houses. Right. I mean, I could tell you horror stories of things that went on in my houses after they left. And the problem is, because of the vacancies, the rentals weren't paying for themselves. Right. So now I'm having to take money from my personal side of my balance sheet and try to focus on the rental side of the balance sheet. Right. And when you've got somebody moving out and you got to go in and spend $10,000 to renovate a house, like, that $10,000 may not be there, right, especially when you multiply that by 5, 6, 8, or 10. Right. And so it got rough. I be perfectly honest. There was a couple of properties that I let go during that time. Right. The banks were calling and they're like, "Hey, man, you're getting behind." I'm like, "Yeah, I realize it, but what do you do?" Yeah. And so it got scary. I mean, the bankruptcy thoughts went through your head, and it was all kinds of stuff that was going on. And luckily, I never had to do that. Never filed bankruptcy, but I ended up just fighting my way out of it. Yeah. I sold everything I could sell. I drove everywhere I had to drive to sell a house. I don't care if I had to drive to Northern Virginia, if it was the beach. I don't care where I had to drive. I drove everywhere. And if it was to drive everywhere to sell a $50,000 house, that's what I did.
Do you think
it was just enough?
Do you think that's what sets you apart from other agents and allow you to be successful later in the brokerage
Most
business?
Definitely.
Is like grinding through that?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, one of the biggest life lessons ever was grinding through it, even though I know, the world is burning down around me. Yeah. And I literally got up every day, put my boots on, and went and sold houses. And that's all I cared about. And I did everything I could. I was doing everything I could to sell a house. And, it worked. It wasn't pretty. There were loans that I was paying from 2007 that I completed paying in 2015 and 2020 even, that stemmed from mistakes that I made back then. But, we got them paid off and creditors were happy, but, it sucks, but that's what you had to do.
Did you have any partnerships during this time or anything like that were affected?
No, not really. Yeah. The guy that I originally went into business with, the guy who originally got me into rentals, we were buying some rentals together and everything. I'd say he and I, we had a good run, but as things started getting rough, it kind of turned south. Right. We both kind of went our separate ways after that.
Do you have any stats on, or like just general, like not exactly, but like just general stats on what other agents were doing during the financial crisis? Because I would imagine that a lot of the agents exited real estate and just were like, I'm not doing this. Yeah. Now, maybe in Richmond or in Virginia, there's like 7,000 agents, and maybe like 2,000 sell a house, and maybe like 1,000 sell more than a house or something. Yeah. But like, do you have any idea of like how many agents were active and actually selling houses during that time?
Honestly, I don't remember. I mean, it was a similar number of agents. I want to say at the peak in like 2007, we were probably at about 4,500 agents at that time. it dropped dramatically after that. So we probably got down to around 3,000, 3,500 at some point. Now it didn't drop as far as I thought it would. I mean, I thought I might be one of 100 agents in Richmond, but that wasn't the case. The way agents pivoted during that time, we all did different things. Like I leaned hard into investors because that was the world that I knew. There were agents that started pivoting towards foreclosures and REOs, and there were some agents that made giant businesses during that time doing that business. There were other agents that got out of it. Some survived. Some focused on investors also. Others focused on doing what they were doing all along. I just know it was difficult, man. And this is the one thing, during that time, you never knew when it was going to stop.
Right.
That was the whole problem is like, was this going to go on for 10 years? Was this going to go on for 2 years? Like we had no idea. It just seemed like every time we would hear a number, it was like getting worse and worse. And the feelings kept getting worse and worse. And, it's finally around, late 2009, probably 2010, when started seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And it's like, okay, I can breathe now. I mean, things weren't great still, but you started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so you start seeing this light at the end of the tunnel. I also should say that like some of the strongest agents I know went through that. And and
if you survived that and you're still in it today, you're killing it. I mean, honestly, you hear the old adage that teams who went into the financial crisis and made it out of it came out stronger and had more market share than they went into it with.
Yeah.
And I see that. Like there's guys that are still in the business today that had teams back in, and I looked up to all of them that came out of it in a much stronger position than they went in.
Yeah.
And they're still going strong today. We're stronger.
Which is true with most. I mean, look at like the military. You go through the toughest training possible, and what do you come out on the other side as? It's like it forges you, right?
Yeah.
Like that suffering and those challenges of being a business owner and going through things like that makes you absolutely resilient if you make it out the other end.
It also makes it hard to work with, especially some of the newer agents that come into the business. They're like, this market is so hard. And it's like, shut the I mean, like, seriously, like this, you have no idea what hard is. You don't know what it's like to grind. The idea of just posting, I'm grinding on your Instagram doesn't mean you're actually grinding. I mean, when you actually get in there and you're getting your elbows dirty and you're worried about whether or not your kids are going to eat and you're doing everything you possibly can to make sure that happens, that's freaking grinding. Not posting the crap on Instagram and then going and having a margarita for lunch.
I posted 3 times this week and I still don't have any leads coming in.
It's amazing how that happens, right?
A little bit of perspective certainly is helpful. I mean, like, that's true. We could go off a tangent that way. But so you decided eventually to start your own brokerage. When you came, so you're coming out, you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I guess it's due to like, you've now learned so much, you've created this like book of business that you have. But what made you want to start a brokerage?
Honestly, it was all by necessity. I really didn't have any necessary desire to start a brokerage.
Interesting.
So 2010, I got introduced to this thing called Zillow and started buying a few leads through Zillow. I had some friends that were doing it in other areas of the country, and I got introduced to it. Started buying a few leads here and there. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, I would spend like $1,000 a month on leads, and praying to God my wife didn't look at the credit card statement and see that I'd spent it because she would have killed me. She's okay with it now. But, it was, I'd spend $1,000 and I'd get 10 people that wanted to buy a house. And it's like, holy crap, this is super easy. And so I started buying leads. That's when I got into the online lead game and started doing it myself. And then I got to the point where I would get busy. And so I would hire people to help me. I started with a transaction coordinator or an administrative assistant, went through that process, and then hired somebody to help me on the marketing side. And so for me, it was by necessity. As I got busy, I hired people to offset me and do, especially the things that I figured out that I'm terrible at. And I would say my greatest superpower was figuring out, was self-awareness, knowing what I'm good at and knowing what I suck at. And when you realize that you suck at a lot more things than you're good at, that's when you're like, okay, how do I offset this? And that's when you start growing the business. So I'd say the genesis of growing the business started in 2010 as I started hiring people to offset my weaknesses. And then around 2013, 2014, I got to the point where I was buying enough leads. I was super busy. I needed help. So I started hiring other agents at that point. And, At first, it was just a small team, 2 agents, myself. I was still doing all the listings. They were doing all the buyer sides, and we kept getting bigger. And as leads continued to grow, we'd hire more agents. And again, just growing out of necessity. It was more about growing a team. And, it was at this time I read Gary Keller's Millionaire Real Estate Agent or $1 Million Real Estate Agent, one of those, the Red Book. And I got super intrigued by the fact that you could build a business in real estate. It wasn't just, a solo agent out there. You could actually build a business doing this. Right. So I got super intrigued by that and used that as my growth model. And, we'll fast forward it because you went from 2014 to about 2019. We grew from me and 2 agents to about, 15 agents or so. And I started slowly backing myself out of the business. I was doing less and less on the listing side and letting the agents take the listings. That's when I realized that, Mike Hogan doesn't have to be the one doing everything. In the early days, and I think a lot of people, especially in entrepreneurs, have this problem, and I know team leaders in real estate have this problem a lot of times, that they think that nobody wants to talk to anybody but the team leader. It's Mike Hogan. If Mike Hogan's not on the other end of the line, it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you what I found was I thought that only people wanted to talk to Mike Hogan when it came to buying houses. And when I started hiring agents, I found out that, wow, they're actually better at this than I am. And then the same thing on the listing side. It's like, all right, you guys can handle the buyers, but I'm going to handle the listings because I'm the one who knows how to do this. And, everybody wants to talk to Mike Hogan when it came to listing their house. And lo and behold, I would hire a couple of agents and that started taking listings. And I'm like, holy crap, these guys are actually really good. And that's when you realize it's like, maybe they are better than I am at this. And that was when I started backing myself out and started focusing on the growth of the business and less on being a real estate agent. Right. And so it was a shift from being a real estate agent to running a business, being a CEO. And when you start thinking like a CEO in that case, you start looking at the business very differently.
100%.
And that was probably around the 2018, 2019, 2020 timeframe when that shift was occurring.
Not to fast forward too much, but I would imagine once you started thinking like a CEO, you saw some very fast growth in your business after that.
Absolutely. When I put people in place, the president of my company today was my second hire.
Awesome.
And I saw very quickly that she was very, very good at what she did. I mean, this is somebody, talk about a grinder. This was somebody that when I hired her, she was an AP biology teacher. So she worked full-time as a teacher and sold 45 properties a year for me.
That's awesome.
And did both. And you would never have known that she was working full-time. She never skipped a beat. She eventually started taking on some training for me. She would train other agents as they came in because she was so good at it. Why not let her do it? So I started focusing on the growth came when I stopped worrying about the coaching and training aspect, right? Because one person can't possibly coach and train 20 people.
Nope.
And if you wanted to get to 50 people, it was literally impossible. So that's when I knew I had to have another layer of management there. Right. And so I was able to talk her into quitting her full-time job and coming and joining me. And awesome. I think she's happy with that decision today. Yeah. She's doing quite well. Again, she's the president of the company. So, but yeah, that's when we saw the real growth of the company. So from 2019, we'll call it to, right at COVID, we grew from probably 15 or 20 agents very quickly to roughly about 100.
That's incredible.
And just in a very short amount of time.
What do you think attracted so many agents to your firm? Because there's a ton of firms in Central Virginia. Some of them are very productive.
Sure.
A handful of good agents and good leaders around here. Why did they want to come to the Hogan Group?
I'll say this. People came for the leads in the beginning, and they stayed for the culture. So they came because, I was essentially the one who had all the internet leads. If you went on Zillow at that time, I was literally everywhere. I was buying from Realtor.com. I was buying from them. I was doing Google pay-per-click. I was doing all the things. So I had all the leads. And people saw the growth. I mean, they saw us go from, just a couple of years earlier selling 100 properties a year to automatically now we're selling 500 properties a year. And I'm like, how did that happen? So we started getting people who wanted to be a part of that.
Right.
But what happened was, again, they came in and, the culture was what made them stay. I mean, we got this. It's even hard to define. I have people all the time say, "Well, what does your culture look like?" And it's hard to define it and put your finger on it.
Right.
It's just something that's there, and you nurture it and you protect it, and that's what makes people want to stay. Typically, now there's been people who have come and gone over the time. A lot of them I didn't want to leave, but I never stop people from doing something that's better for them. It does make me feel good when people leave and then want to come back. And some of them we do let come back, and some we haven't. But again, that's part of protecting that culture.
100%. And you have to do that for a sustainable business. And I realized like the first 15, 20 people, at least from my experience on our team, we have about close to 50 people now. The first 15 is easily manageable as far as culture is concerned. But we hit, like, there was a certain point, it might have been our 20th hire or something like that, where I was like, things feel different. Things feel different. Like, things are too far away. And then it became a whole different culture game after that, of like how to manage that and how to control it beyond
it's a full-time
what
job.
I could reach as a CEO. And then so you have to instill the culture in the next layer and make sure they understand the vision and how to portray that culture, so then the ripple goes further out.
And if you have multiple locations, it gets even harder. So that was the one thing. It was kind of a wake-up call for me. I started hearing some of my agents say, hey, this doesn't feel like it did before. Like, it's good for me, but like, I don't know who these people are that are coming in. You're hiring so many people. And that time I was with Keller Williams running a team. This was early 2017, 2018. And we were going heavily into their expansion program. We had teams in several places throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, and it just got really big and unruly. And it was also right about the time that we had decided to create our own brokerage. And 2019 is when we split off and decided we're going to do our own thing. And one of the things that we did when we did that was we eliminated all the excess teams that were in other places that were distracting. They were making money, but not great money. But they were more of a distraction and more of they're hard to replicate our culture in those areas. And we didn't do a good job of that. And so I pulled it back and started focusing on our core area. And that's when I think things really started to click. We focused heavily on our Richmond market. We had this fledgling Charlottesville office that we were just starting up. And it's much easier when you are in one place all the time and can focus on the culture and really focus on the people that you're bringing in, making sure that they fit the culture. It's much easier to do that when you're not trying to do too many things.
Right. We've had the opportunity to expand multiple times, and a lot of requests and clients in different markets and things. We have been tempted every single time, but we've always said no, and we've turned down tons of units and tons of clients because we are protecting what we are building so intentionally to make sure that we're not losing anything, because we have something really good going on now. I don't want to damage that.
Right, exactly.
And so we're very selective about where we go. And we are starting to look at like some expansion opportunities now, but we are very cautious.
And you'll know when that is. You'll know when that time is right. I mean, honestly, as a CEO, you've got the pulse on the company. Like, you'll know when it's time to make that move. And the mistake that I made early on with expansion was I wanted to expand for the sake of expanding. And I'd pick a market that I wanted to be in, and I'd go hire a bunch of agents. My mistake was I didn't have the person there. Like the person 100%. Who bought into my culture. And so I was trying to grow all these little teams, and I didn't really have good leadership in any of them. And so when I pulled back, one of the things that I realized is when you want to build a business, whether it's an extension of your current business or a new business, you got to build it around the person. You've got to have people in place to make it work. And that's been one of the differences for us as we have grown. One of my focuses internal in our company is looking at bench strength and making sure that we have people who can be that next level of manager, who can take on another role. All of our hires internally, all of our businesses are now managed by people who were agents in our company, and people who just showed something beyond just being an agent. When you realize that, when you have the person, you can go and build around them. Sometimes it may not even be a place that you were thinking about. It's that you find this team with a leader that's amazing, and they get it, and you're like, you know what? I can build a business around this person. It's kind of like, you think about it, it's like a football team. When you get that stud quarterback, you build your team around that quarterback's strengths, right? It's the same thing in this. Like, you build the team around that person, and that's what makes it successful. If you just go out and say, you know what? I can sell a whole lot of real estate here, but I got to go hire a bunch of people, but I don't have that one person. I can almost tell you it's not going to work. Or it's not going to be pretty.
Right. And that is great advice. I was fortunate to see that play out in a previous company that I worked for in the fitness industry back in the day. They had 30-something locations, but I noted that they were opening up locations like crazy. Every time they opened a location, they picked the rock star at the most like local location. They picked the number one person and made them, gave them some incentive to open up the next shop.
Yeah.
And so it would not happen without that. You needed someone who was bought in, knows exactly what's going on.
Yes.
And so we just opened up an office in Petersburg, and we have one of our level 10, one of our executive people are now working down there because he's bought in on the culture.
Knows the culture and can replicate the culture there. Right.
And so that is what we're doing too, because we've thought about this, and it's funny because when I talk about expansion, like we look at the opportunities. It could be a client with a lot of properties in one market that we would love to do business with, or something where we can go kind of like get on that ledge and then build around it.
Yep.
Or it can be a person that wants to work for Peak and that really gets it and knows it, that is willing to come work with us in our culture for a while, and then we can go open up that market. And we're working on both.
Critical. That person is just so critical.
Right. And that's the hardest thing to find.
It's so hard. That's why we focus so intently in the business today and developing bench strength. I mean, a lot of what we do is looking for that next person. Who's that next person who's going to stand up that can take on more responsibility? And we're watching. I mean, we pay them. We have mentors in our group today. We have team leaders that they're responsible for 3 to 4 agents each. And the reason that we do those types of things is we're giving them opportunities to see where they shine. Because for me, the person that I want is the person that people naturally gravitate to and ask questions of. Just because you make somebody a team leader doesn't necessarily mean they're a leader, right? So I'm looking for those people that people naturally look at as a leader, and I can put them in place, and then it's easy. Things just flow, and when things flow, it makes it so much easier. But those people are the people that we're looking at for our next level. Our managing broker of our Charlottesville office, she just got promoted into sales director with the team, and now one of our current team leaders just got promoted into the managing director at the Charlottesville office. So we're moving these people around, and these are all people from within the organization who've been with us for a few years, but we've been able to watch them and develop their strengths and help them, and it's worked out well. But you only have so many people, right? And so that's why developing that bench strength is so critical. You always got to be watching out for who's that next person.
I would assume you're still heavily investing through growing the brokerage.
Yeah.
Are you doing flips, rentals? Are you doing crazy like short terms? Are you getting into anything creative or what?
I'm pretty boring. I'll be perfectly honest. My thing is long-term rentals, single-family houses, and I do some flips. I do a lot of wholetailing. Not so much wholesaling, but love the wholesales in certain places. But really, I'm going into almost every purchase I make that I want to keep it. And sometimes I'll get a deal that doesn't make sense for me to put into my portfolio, and those are the ones I either wholesale or flip. But I prefer every single one that I buy, I want to keep it.
What is your portfolio like? What does fit your portfolio? A 3-2 single family house?
I love give me the 3-bed 1, 3-bed 2, maybe 4-bed 2-bath in good areas, preferably nice lawn, decent established neighborhood. But I've got some that don't fit that mold too. It's just, for me, I look at my portfolio, and I have several mini portfolios, I like to say. Like I have a portfolio that's all sandstone properties, right? And they're all the same thing. They're 2-bed, 1-bath. They're super easy to rent. I know the minute I look at it, everything that's got to be done to that house to get it ready.
They're all the same,
super easy, right? But then I've also got this portfolio in Mechanicsville that's 4-bed, 2.5-bath, modern houses that have 2-car garages, that type of thing. So I also have this portfolio of those, and that's how I look at them, as different portfolios. It's not always geographical. Sometimes it's just type of house. But yeah, that's the way I like to look at them.
How are you sourcing them now? Now, obviously, you have a massive network now.
Sure, yeah.
So that's got to be helpful. Is it mostly through referrals and relationships now, or are you doing marketing?
We do marketing, but I'll be honest, the majority of my business comes through referrals, relationships, social media. Anybody who follows me on social media knows that I talk a lot about flips and rentals and things like that, right? Some good content. There's a strategy behind that. Let's be real. I'm not doing that because, I like being on camera. Honestly, I hate being on camera. I hate how I sound. I hate how I look. I hate everything about being on camera, but I also know it works.
Right.
And I've gotten deals because people see me. And I've even had agents who will come to me and say, hey, I've got this property. I know you do stuff like this. And they wouldn't have known that I do stuff like this if they hadn't seen my social media, right?
That's awesome.
So it's social media, it's relationships, the relationships that I've built over the last 25 years in this market, and just doing things the right way. not being shitty, being a good person. That's the way I try to live my life. And that comes back because there's relationships people see, and they're like, okay, if you're in a seriously bad situation, you've got to talk to Mike because he's the person who's going to shoot you straight and tell you what you really need to do. And so that's probably the biggest thing. Now, we do marketing as well. And we do a lot of marketing. At previous, until last year, I owned a home investors franchise.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which I did that specifically because it's super easy. You go in, you buy a franchise, you pay a marketing fee every month, and boom, leads come in. Super easy. It actually ran very similar to my real estate company, because that's the way we run things. We have a marketing budget that we spend on leads every month, and bam, leads come in and people are ready to buy a house. This was a little bit different. I spend money, people are willing to sell a house. And we ended that relationship in April after 5 years. It worked really well, but I started doing the marketing through the brokerage because I think the brokerage has honestly a better brand name than what I was seeing there, and I could concentrate my marketing dollars better and make them work better for me. So that's what we do. We do all of our marketing now through the Hogan Group. So
it's like mailers or just online content?
Mailers, online content. We do a lot of, obviously a lot of Google, PPC and stuff like that. Yeah. But mailers, I'd say mailers and Google are the two places that we're focusing heavily on for that stuff. And the concept is pretty easy. Hey, we can buy your house for cash or we can list your house. And, I really think one of the biggest problems that people have with investors is they always think investors are out for themselves. And, let's be real. If you're an investor going to buy a house, your goal is to get that house at the lowest price possible, which doesn't always work in the customer's benefit, the client's benefit, right? So I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach to it and say, look, I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I'll tell you what I'll pay for it, and I'll tell you how I get to that number. But I'll also tell you what you can get if we list your house to sell. Right. And sometimes that means I'm going to miss out on a deal. But if that person realizes that, hey, your house is worth X, I can only give you Y. But here's the downside to getting, to waiting for X. But, you're going to make more money doing this. Right. And you'd be surprised at how many people thank us for taking that approach, but then end up taking the lower number to get it done quickly.
Yeah, I'm laughing because that was one of my biggest faults when I was out hunting for deals, like a lot more than I am now, is I would always tell them the retail side of things, because I felt like it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do.
I'd make an offer and be like, hey, look, but if you put it on market, and I'm not even like an agent selling for anyone. I mean, I'm licensed now, but I don't do third party sales. And so I literally would tell people like, man, if you just put it on market, like this still would sell quickly, and you could probably get this much for it. And they'd be like, thank you, and I'd be like, all right, here's an agent. Yeah. And I'd just walk away and be like, all right, I'll buy one someday.
I mean, it happens, but let's be real. I mean, it was probably not going to be a great deal for you. And, you did right by the customer.
Yeah, I feel fine for it.
You can sleep well at night. So what? Maybe you miss a couple deals that you wouldn't have had, but at the end of the day, you can sleep better at night, and you're doing right by people.
And I was still buying plenty. Like there's that.
Of course. There's so much
abundance
out there.
Mindset where it's not like, hey, if you can win, I'll go win somewhere else. Like we're good to go.
I tell people all the time, man, there's so much clean money out there that you don't have to be dirty in order to make money. There's 100%. so much opportunity in this market, even today, that you don't have to do crappy things. Unfortunately, we still see people do crappy things. I mean, just watch the news. Somebody will do something and they'll end up on the news pretty soon. It happens. We used to have it about one a year. Now it's about one every 3 years, but somebody will end up on the news soon because they were doing crappy things. And I always tell my agents at that point, I'm like, see, this is what I'm always talking about. You don't have to do dirty business. You can do clean business and make just as much money.
Right. The next 5 years, more of the same, or what? Do you have different goals or different vision for what's ahead?
I think the next 5 years are actually going to be the most critical in our business. So for me, I am focusing on my job today. I'm focusing on is looking around the next corner. What's coming down the pike that I've got to prepare my company for and prepare my agents for. Because the way I look at it, I'm between 80 and 100 agents right now. I've got staff. I've got other companies that I have staff in. And I look at it as I have people whose livelihoods and their families' livelihoods depend on decisions that I make today for the future. And so I don't take that lightly. Like I look at that and just know that I've got to make good decisions, which means I've got to be 100% focused on what's happening in the next 5 years. And let's be real. I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, AI is changing a lot of things out there. It has the propensity to change some things in our business to a large degree. So my focus right now is how is everything that's happening right now, whether it's AI, whether it's legislation, whatever, how is that going to affect the business? Yep. And how do I best position us today to take advantage of that? Because I can guarantee you there's people who aren't paying attention to it. And there's people who 5 years from now, they're in the business today, won't be here in 5 years. It'll happen. I'm going to make sure that not only are we here, but we are continuing to dominate. And that's where I'm focusing right now. So the next 5 years for me, I think it's a lot of what you've seen. There's going to be changes. Some of it's going to be rapid change. Some of it's going to be slower, and you probably won't know it's changing until it's actually done. But I think for us, it's staying on top of those changes and just making sure that we're well capitalized to take advantage of it.
You're going to continue to buy rentals?
Absolutely.
You mentioned it was for legacy at this point. Like at some point it's for building, like for making some sort of income and living some sort of, normal life. There's some aspect of the chase and like accomplishment and stuff like that. And then towards, at some phase it's legacy and what impact you want to make or how you want to be remembered or what you can do with what is that? You mentioned like hand it to your kids, they can hand it to their kids, etc. Describe what you want that legacy to be.
So I'll say it's legacy and passion, because my passion is, and you mentioned chasing the deals, like there is no better feeling for me than to get the deal. Like after I get the deal, it's kind of like, okay, it is what it is now. Let's stuff it into the portfolio. We'll renovate and stuff it into the portfolio. But it's getting that deal is just so freaking exciting for me. That's what I'm passionate about. But yeah, so for me, the income is great. I've always looked at rental houses as being my 401k. I'm not super crazy about having all my money stuffed in a fund somewhere that I can't touch and I can't manage. So I look at rental properties as my 401k, and I just know how much money I need to live on. Let's say, I don't know that I'll ever retire. I mean, why retire when you love what you do? So I doubt I'll ever truly retire, but I'm sure at some point, my wife will be retired. We'll slow down. My wife's a teacher today. So there'll be a point in our lives where she's not working, which means we'll do more travel and do more things that we love to do. So I'll probably slow down. But to me, when that happens, I've got all these businesses that are providing me income, but I also have the rental properties that are providing income. So it's an income provider for now. And I don't even look at how much the properties are appreciated. I mean, obviously I pay attention to it because I look at my net worth fairly regularly, but I look at those assets will be something for my family, and whether we're able to give a bunch of it away, which I would love to see us do. I would love to see the family. I want to take the Warren Buffett approach, and I want to give it to my family in order for them to give away a lot of it. Maybe they give away some of the income or whatever, but I want to see them give away, to whatever charity they want to give it to. I want to give them those options to do that. But I just wanted to build something that not so much to remember me by. I'm not so much worried about that. But I just want to make sure that my family is comfortable going forward. I don't ever want anybody to have to go through what I went through in 2007, 2008, 2009. Actually, that's probably a driving force for me to have this legacy, and so that my family never has to feel that. And hopefully that's, my kids and their kids and their kids. I mean, I hope that it'll continue to do that throughout their lives, but that's really what it comes down to.
I'm going to ask you a question that's off the path.
Okay.
That I didn't expect to ask, but I'm curious to see what your feedback is on this. You are thankfully and fortunately providing a lot for your family. Mm-hmm. How are you going to make sure that your kids understand suffering and being challenged and things like that?
That's a great question. And it's funny because I have those conversations with my kids right now. My kids are older. My daughter's 28, just got married. My son's 25. He's in a great relationship. They both have great jobs. They're both making great money. They're both in my businesses, doing big things. My son's doing some things on his own too. I never let them feel the struggle back then.
Right.
And so it's fun now. Like, my son and I do this quite often. We'll, whether we're at our house at the river or wherever, smoking a cigar, drinking a bourbon, and we're just chilling together. And I've gotten where they're at an age now where I can tell them
that's awesome
what I went through. And both of them tell me, they're like, we never felt that. They both say that, like, we never felt that. I was like, well, that was kind of the idea. Like, I didn't want you to feel it. Yeah. And so for me, I think I don't necessarily want them to struggle. I've allowed them to struggle. We made sure they were comfortable, but we also made sure that they made mistakes. We made sure they made their own decisions. We made sure that they learned how to get along with each other, because that's all you're going to have at some point. We've allowed them to make mistakes and make their own decisions. So I think that was a big part of it. But then the rest of it, I think, is now letting them see, hey, this was the struggle. I never let you feel the struggle, but this is what it felt like. Yeah. And, they'll listen to this podcast, and they're, for them to hear that, oh my God, my dad let houses go to foreclosure because he was struggling. Right. Like, it sucks for me to think about them hearing it, but I'm glad they hear it now. Yeah. I didn't want them to hear it then.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. And I have young kids, and it actually kind of gets me a little emotional thinking about it, because I'm like, there's a lot of struggle in what I built, right? Yeah. And everyone has their story. It's not, certainly not about me, but there's been a lot of struggle in building this company and going through so many things and getting it to where we are now. My son right now is 5 years old. He has no freaking idea. He's just off in his world. Yeah. But I can't imagine when he's 25 and we're sitting at our beach house or river house or wherever we are, and we're having a drink together. Dude, and I'm telling him,
it's the best feeling. I'm telling you, it's actually a pretty awesome feeling when your kids realize, holy shit, Dad's actually pretty fucking cool. That's awesome. They grew up their whole life and they're like, my God, until they're about 10, you're the superhero. Right. And then from 10 to about 20, you're like, Jesus, Dad, come on. Yeah. But now when, they're older and they hear the things that you went through and they see the business that you've built, 100%. They start to realize that, holy crap, this took a lot. And when they hear it coming directly from me, and I'm very open with them now. I tell them literally everything now. It's pretty cool for them to see that, Dad busted his ass to make this happen, and we never felt it. Yeah, and it's cool. It's a good feeling.
That's awesome. I'm glad I asked that question, and I appreciate you sharing that. What's your number one advice for someone who wants to start investing today?
Man, first off, just buy the deal. Just do it. You're never going to learn anymore. Just buy it. It's. I think I mentioned it earlier. It's so hard to lose money in real estate. It really is. I'm not saying that it can't be done. I've lost money in real estate. I mentioned that earlier. Chances are you're not going to lose money. Right. Just buy the deal. You're going to learn so much more than you'll ever learn from looking at a book. So I'd say that's number one. Two, it's find a tribe. And this is my advice to real estate agents and people growing a business also. Find people that you can talk to who are doing the same things and going through the same things. For me, as building a real estate brokerage, I had friends across the country who were building businesses at the same level, same scale, and same type of model that I was using, that they're my best friends. If I had to go see my best friends today, other than my kids and my wife, I literally have to jump on a plane to go see them. And we do. We meet up at conferences all the time. Right. And so we bounced ideas off of each other, and I'd tell somebody, hey, I'm doing this. And they're like, holy crap, that's a great idea. And then they would go do it, and now they're making money. Mm-hmm. So I'd say find a tribe that you can lean on, because nobody knows what you're going through. Unless they're doing it also. Right. I mean, your wife and anybody else in your family, they see it. They have no idea what's going on inside your mind, inside your heart. I mean, they don't know those things. Right. So finding a group of people that you can lean on that does know what you're going through is super critical.
That's been a world of difference for me. Yeah. I took it all in, and I would try to share with my wife, and she graciously would listen and provide feedback and stuff. But then when I found property management company owners in Washington and Utah and Florida and outside the market, that you could, here's my P&L, just wide open book. Here's the ideas. Here's what's working. Here's what's not. Employees and all these different things. Team structure.
All the things that are going on. Here's a new model that I'm using, or here's a new software product that just came out. I mean, there's so many things that you can learn from other people. You don't have to do this alone. Yeah. So find that tribe, and that's true for investors. There's so many groups out there for investors. I mean, take advantage of all of that stuff. Do all the reading. Be on Bigger Pockets. Listen to as much as you can. Absorb as much as you can. But at the end of the day, just buy the damn house. Yeah. That's it.
Where can people find you?
Google me. I assure you, if you just type my name into Google, you can figure out where I am. I'm on Insta. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the socials. And obviously, you can call the Hogan Group. Our website is hogangrp.com. My personal email is mike@hogangrp.com. Anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help anybody I can.
Any final thoughts?
Not really. This was great, man.
Awesome, man. Incredible story. I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your experience and your knowledge. And it's been great to learn about your story and the impact that you're making. I've seen it, which is why I invited you on the podcast. I've seen your content. I've seen what you've built, and I've heard incredible things about you. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.